Okay, we're going to look into ancient Egyptian medicine here. This is a papyrus that's found in Copenhagen, and it has hieratic writing onto it. It's kind of like Egyptian shorthand, and some of it's written in red, as you see here and stuff. But they have a lot of these in a lot of museums and stuff, and many of which, including a large bundle at Copenhagen, have not been deciphered. Let's look into this, and of course, during this, I'll digress as I usually do. An Egyptian papyrus between 1500 and 1300 BC offers a method for diagnosing pregnancy. It advises women to pee into a bag of barley and a bag of wheat. The papyrus is one of many currently being translated by an international team of researchers at the University of Copenhagen. And so let's look into this. 3,500 years ago, a woman might have done much the same thing to find out if she was pregnant as she would today. Take a urine sample and wait patiently for a chemical reaction. Nowadays, we have the sticks that are reactive to exactly certain hormones, and it'll show up a pregnancy test quite rapidly. And now they've developed it off of certain hormones that show up exactly whenever, or shortly after you actually conceive and become pregnant, at the very moment of not having to wait till after you figure out you've missed your cycle or anything like that and then take one. And they show up rather rapidly. It's kind of neat to find something scientifically like that, and it harkens to something like that, but yet it doesn't really in that way. But ancient medicines did lead to modern medicines and so on. Now, the highlights of this story, I guess, are ancient Egyptian pregnancy test is the first known method to use urine, which we actually do use today. And modern analysis suggests that these tests may have some scientific basis to them. Research at the University of Copenhagen, where that papyrus is from, is revealing more about the ancient Egyptian medical practices, but there's a whole lot more that they could add to it. Now, if they grow, here's what it says basically in transcription. If they grow, she will give birth. If the barley grows, it's a boy. If emmer wheat, grows, it's a girl. If they do not grow, she will not give birth, reads that text. It's written in hieratic, as I was saying, in the ancient Egyptians' cursive form, if you will, of hieroglyphic writing, and it's really much more less than that and a lot easier to transcribe and so on, and isn't the holy writing that they had. It's dated from the New Kingdom era, sometime between 1500 and 1300 BC. And so the reaction between wheat and barley in the urine in their analysis determined pregnancy on the women. And so it was a birth prognosis, which was first translated by a Danish Egyptologist back in 1939. It's just one of an example of a large collection of ancient Egyptian papyri belonging to the University of Copenhagen, acquired by grants from the Carlsberg Foundation. And I believe that's one of the beer corporations, Carlsberg, and hugely known and stuff. Love the beer too, by the way. But if it's who I'm thinking of, they've given millions to certain aspects of finding out things, and I think it's wonderful when companies like this can do such and take some of their egregious growings and do something for humanity and for the cause of all, and just for general humanity itself. Anyhow, one of the 1,400 papyri that they have, a tiny proportion are medical texts, though, which have remained untranslated. So people need to get on to this translation here, because there's a lot of people that do have the ability to translate this, and you can easily have somebody do it during their college ending stuff and find somebody that would probably take it on quite well if given the opportunities. But it tells you here, we're dealing with the kind of material that is so incredibly rare, says Egyptologist Kim Ryholt, head of the Carlsberg Papyrus Collection and part of the international research collaboration translating the text. There's less than a dozen well-preserved ancient Egyptian medical papyri. Anything new will shed new light. But there are a lot that are still undeciphered, so they should do so. Uh, Here, another one that I'm going to do a vid on here shortly, that I've already done a part one on, is ancient tattoos and the Egyptian tattoos, and the related article here showing you that these earliest, even Badarian people and the Nakada and pre-dynastic people that you would know of, that are, what we call pre-dynastic Egypt, had massive tattooing going on. Here's the one. I don't know if it shows so well in the picture, but this is one of the early Badarians here. I believe this is Ginger, famously known for his blonde and curly hair here and stuff. So less than a dozen of these, though, medical papyri they say they have out. And I looked through these whenever I was a kid. Just a side note here. Let me go off in left field like I do. I used to play. Now, don't think bad of me. I used to play Dungeons and Dragons, the old game, and it's really a board game type of aspect, but written down onto paper, and it's a thinking game. And people have characters, and then due to what type of character they are, and you try to stay within character too, so it has drama moments and things like that to it, and a lot of it can be interactions between people. And then there, of course, is fighting and killing off monsters that you have to do with a combat type of thing that you do by just rolling dice, and it's percentage chances versus what you have on your character. So the better your character gets, the less chance of missing and all these things, and the more damage they do. It's evolved into quite a few video games. And if you've looked at a few of my videos, I've got a video game called Neverwinter that I've played that goes along that line. Anyhow, during that time, we went through Egyptian mythos and a lot of the other mythos, because Dungeons and Dragons does so, along with fairy worlds and just anything you want to make up. You can try to go through it, and you have a dungeon master guy that tries to, he has the whole idea of what's going to all go on, and its limits and boundaries somewhat, and then you just kind of wing it and go. And you'll have non-player characters that he has along with the group quite often to help flesh out the whole story, and that and a few descriptions and so on, and it really puts you into the scene, and you're in ancient Bavaria and you've got this, and it's a foggy night and blah blah blah, and you hear in the distance these music and da da da, and you can get somebody into the mood and stuff. And then basically you just describe what's going on and what do you do, and you ask people questions. You let them have a lot of interaction too with it, because it's really what it is. Anyhow, during this time we looked up this and a lot of ancient stuff, or I really was, whenever I was doing dungeon mastering things, to where it would give me ideas to do for like scrolls, or this magician says this, or little things like that out of it. And I found this and a few other ones, but also found out then that they had a whole bunch of them that weren't undeciphered at that time, and seems like they still aren't deciphered here this long ahead. And it's kind of just that moment there kind of made me want to make this video, along with the fact of what it says. Anyhow, there's promising new insights. Translation is a long process. The texts are damaged. They're written in an ancient script that few people can read, and the terminology is immensely complex, says Ryholt. The wheat and barley tests are already known from a papyrus of a similar date that's now held at the Egyptian Museum of Berlin. So I'm not sure which one I even saw before, but I knew of both of them. Anyhow, however, there are revelations since the research collaboration began in September 2017. Until now, many Egyptologists thought that the civilization was unaware of the existence of kidneys. But one of the new translated medical texts discussed the organ, showing that their knowledge of anatomy was even more advanced than previously thought. And so they did understand what did what in certain ways. The oddity that comes out of Egypt whenever you study it is that whenever they died, they took the brain out through the nose and stuff and everything. And of course, this is probably to keep the body from rotting in any way. And they would individually embalm all of those things, and or mummify them in their way and put them in the Coptic jars and stuff like that. But the brain seems to have been not the thing that's kept. And we know it's kind of the most important thing that makes you, you. So these people didn't quite have it going on, but in a lot of ways did, for from this type of aspect, we still embalm our dead to this day in a preservation that helps give you enough time for family to get there and things like that. But here's another one of those scripts, and you can see some of it's in red and so on, and it's easier to discern, but also just simple looking here, you can see that there are like standing men and symbolism done also with other things that come across as words. So this one, by the way, is for eye diseases, and I think it describes it. Other papyri include various treatments for eye diseases such as trichiasis, which is where the eyelashes grow inwards towards the eye. Quite often you'll get a sty out of things like this and so on. The papyrus describes mixing the blood of a lizard, a bull, and a female donkey and a female goat, and the inserting of the concoction into the eye. So I'm not sure if this irritated you to the point that your eyelashes fell out or something, but hey, Sophie Schote, one of the PhD students analyzing the text, suggests that there may have been many standardized medical corpus containing text and treatments used across ancient Egypt, but she urges caution as they show the small number of the papyri and the uncertainty as to where they come from geographically means that it's hard to say exactly how representative the texts are of necessarily all of Egypt, I guess referring to, and so on like that. Transmissions of knowledge, though, from this. One thing is for sure, the pregnancy test method had longevity, this concept of immer wheat and grains to do it. And they tell you that they find the same test in Greek and Roman medicine, in the Middle East during the Middle Ages, and European medical tradition, says Schott. This test appears as late as 1699 in a book of elder German folklore, and at this time, in what we now refer back to as, the Dark Ages and so on, people that had a lot of this information and so on, or medicinal things, were looked at as being witches. And I'm not sure if people are aware well of all of it, but like the barbers of the time were actually the medicine men of the people and stuff, and you can see that clearly if you look into the history of barbers. And of course, barbers has to do with barbaric, has to do with beards too, and that's why they are the barbers that we see that they talk about in The Barber of Seville and Figaro. They also there's a lot that I could do on beards and barbarism and how that refers to different people over time, and of course a lot of people in their ways and not understanding other people's ways and stuff called each other barbarians quite a bit a lot of times. And this is back whenever people were really getting their crap together good, so the people that stood up well would quite often call others barbarians, and almost a call to get your act together. But another neat thing about this concept we're looking at too is that this immer grains that they have in Egypt, and is actually directly lineated to the grains that we all eat today of the wheat, barley, and so on, all come from Proto-Indo-Europeans and Sumeria, and some of the earliest farmers around Anatolia and at the top of the Tigris and Euphrates, where in the Bible it tells you Eden was in the Great Garden type situation. And in this may go back to a lot before that. In fact, it may go back to primordial man and cavemen having found this idea out. I've seen a thing maybe 20 years ago now where a guy was explaining a few of these things and then trying to tell you where the idea might have came from, where we're like, they shoved the crap in their eye. Well, whoever came up with that crap in the first place, and how did it work enough to where people were like, yeah, do that, So it's kind of a weird thing, and there's some odd ones and stuff, and they're involving like onions and all kinds of things. We'll get to one or two of those, but why would that be the case? And there had to have been something to it. We find aspirin from willow bark and things like that, and we have of course these people back at this time here too definitely knew of medicines that were, I guess we'd say, of a numbing effect, if you want to call it that, because they actually knew definitely the powers of opium and so on, and the opium poppy and its loss and its ability to actually, numb things and do things in certain ways. Women could use this in childbirth and things along that line. I mean, uh, a lot of things can be figured out and taken from such, but more and more medicines and treatments, because you can't just alleviate pain and it go away. What do? I mean, you have to set that bone. You have to, work on the person. A lot of these early poultices contain this opium stuff in the poultice, and they put it directly on the wound. So it'd go directly and try to kill the pain receptors. It makes excellent sense. They have other ones for teeth and remedies and stuff and put them in their mouth. And I'm guessing there was some guy that had a smashed foot and that had a toothache. They put the toothache in, and it somehow, whoops, I swallowed it. Next thing he goes, hey, I'm kind of numb all over. Hey, my foot don't hurt. And then maybe that leads to the modern idea of like pills and such. But a lot of this was like directive medicine. Some of it was very indirective medicine, almost like a voodoo situation, where if they thought the symptom was something that perhaps would come and go, quite often they would do some type of transference where they would say, well, I'm going to transfer that to you to this, and then I'm going to make that go away. And now, yeah, yours is going to go away. Well, the sniffles does go away in a couple of days in most cases. If not, take 2 pills and call me in the morning. And so it works out of that type of situation, and trial and error in effect. But once science came into it and higher knowledge, it really changed into something that we have today. But I always, whenever I think about how advanced we are today, that Star Trek movie I saw whenever I was a kid, the ancient one with Kirk and so on, and but the movie form of it, where Bones comes into a hospital and there's elderly lady there and stuff, and he gives her a pill, and next thing you know, she's running down the hallway and they're having to chase her and stuff, and dialysis. She's like, how barbaric. So anyhow, let's just go on to this and tell you more what it says. In the ancient world, Egyptian medicine was highly respected, and their methods were often adopted by other cultures and shared between, of course. It explains Andreas Winkler, an Egyptologist from the University of Oxford. Ancient travelers to Egypt were amazed at the fact that there were doctors specializing in particular areas of medicine, and their knowledge was praised, he says. As the pregnancy test shows, it's clear that certain techniques found their ways beyond the shores of the Nile, but it's not necessarily proven that it was originating in the Nile, or that it wasn't even actually brought to these people, maybe during the time that they find these scrolls, and this was something that someone else had said that they had put into their libraries, tried 10 times, didn't work, 2 guys went blind, and they dropped it. Really, it's at this point, it's not confirmed in any way, shape, or form, but yet the P one and the urine one did have weight, did have value. This is written in Demotic script again. This is a style that's commonly used in the 7th century BC, and this is 2nd century AD papyrus, and it gives various treatments for anal disorders like hemorrhoids and so on. And I'm not going to go that deep into that one either. Not only did the method stand the test of time, but it may also have some scientific substance. According to an article published in the Journal of Medical History back in 1963, researchers tested the theory with immergrains and wheat with pregnant women and found that in 70% of the cases, the urine of pregnant women did cause the grain to sprout. The test, though, was deemed unreliable for predicting the sex of the children, in which they said that, well, if this one sprouts, it's probably going to be a boy and probably going to be a girl. Forever, we've tried to make this declination of where it's going to be a boy and where it's going to be a girl and so on. And definitely in Egypt, when these people were looking for heirs of the throne, they were probably looking for some signification, whether it was going to be a boy or a girl. There's Chinese charts and stuff and all kinds of things. I think it's amazing now. Now, just listen to this exacting fact. Right now, you'll go and you'll find out that you're pregnant. That doctor will ask you about pretty much when was your last period, and off of that, He'll look at a chart over here and you go, you're going to have the baby between April 14th and April 28th. But as you get closer, I'll pin it down. And people don't understand how amazing that is. But I've shown in a lot of my elder things, even on ancient mammoth bones, there are 9 scratches on a moon symbolized thing, and it shows you that they go through 9 moons of gestation, and a woman's period is run around the same gestation time. And so they did have that concept going a long time ago, as long as you can figure out whenever pretty much it would happen. And when a woman ovulates, they've also figured out between certain areas, and women can utilize that to allow themselves to become pregnant or to not do so, along with birth control methods people use today and so on. Now, modern scholars have attributed to the test accuracy to the high levels of estrogen that are in a pregnant woman's urine, which helps to stimulate growth of the wheat and barley, they say. So did the ancient Egyptian doctors know about hormones in urine? I don't think it's really of that depth, but cause and effect is there, but they didn't understand it to a complete degree, as I just described about brains and so on, and, you know, shoving lizard and poop in your eye and so on. But, so no, says Dr. Schott, in any ideal of hormonal influences is completely non-existent. Well, you don't have to say it that scientifically. You could just go, nah. But instead, she suggests that the test's accuracy is probably down to trial and error. And here's an idea, just a concept. Oh, here's a king tut, and I'll throw this in there, but I am going to have to do a separate one about it, because I've done one about the finding of it, where people took the radars in the king tut's area, and they say there's a, and whenever they made a 3D exact laser representation of the room, there's this indentation on a wall, and because there's a room over there, and they did find one over there, then they say, well, there might be one through there, and people almost want to bust through the wall and find out, and then ruin the beautiful artwork that's on the wall in some way, or a pinhole with a little camera to go through. And so they've done better tests onto it, and they go, no, there's nothing there. It's just the plaster and levels and so on. So we'll get into that here. But one thing I want to tell you about the influences here that they have, and it was down to trial and error. A thought could be as something as simple as they also saw this in cows and Hathor and all the things that had to go with it in the sacred cows, right? So you would Apis bulls, things along that line, so where you would think that they may have noticed it from there, and who knows? I mean, cows put out a huge amount of estrogen whenever they do it. It's a simple test for cows, and all you have to do is just run anything up under their pee, and you can tell, well, what if a cow was to pee on grain, and then they realized, well, the pregnant cow peed on this grain, and it sprouted, and the other did not. And then they noticed something like that, and then a lady says, I think I'm pregnant, and somebody went through the thought process and said, well, pee on some grain, and let's see if it does anything. And through a process of trial and error, it seemed like it did have something to do with it. Of course, you just wet grain and it'll try to sprout, but then its efficiency has to be noted and so on. And of course, whether it dries up real quick and all these factors, whether it's kept more, in wetness, or if the pee dries up real quick onto it and the uric acid tries to do bad things to the thing as it tries to attempt to sprout. There's a lot that I'm sure these scientists have gone into. But just some thoughts on that, how it could have come about, how accidentally things could happen like that, to where you could tell. It could be that the plowmen using female cows that were known to be pregnant at the time and bloated, plowing fields, and how they used her for a certain area and then other ones for other areas. Once that started to grow up, they're like, bam, look at this all grow right here when we used old Bessie. And she's pregnant. So does that mean something? Because she peed right through here, and look at that area. I plowed the field, I know. And then somebody went through the intelligence of figuring that concept out. Anyhow, some of this seems odd, though, to you, too, because other pregnancy tests in Egyptian papyri were less reliable. Winkler tells of an onion test that advises inserting an onion into the vagina of a woman, and if her breath smelled like onions the next day, it meant she was pregnant. And so you can see that there is a lot of ancient folkloric type remedies going around, and some of them had validity and other ones didn't. And as they dispersed out and science came in, all of that kind of went away. And the amazing thing they found out of chemistry and science blending together was some of this added grounds for actual truth and fact. And we even utilize this concept today. So it's difficult to put our idea of rational, or what we think of that today's scientific medicine, into what they were doing, says Schott. Ancient Egyptian medicine was grounded in religious or mythological stories, and pharmaceutical